in that moment, when we make that choice, that's when we start to change. And through the habit of continuing to make that same choice, that is how we biologically become our transformed self.
Any successful relationship starts with finding your center, the truth at the core of who you are. Only then can you develop the ability to truly connect with someone else. Concentric is about aligning with people who share a common center. This show gives you the tools and the skills to do just that through practical training, real life stories and examples, and in-depth interviews with people who have taken this journey and come out the other side better for it. Welcome to Concentric. We're glad you're here. Welcome to episode 8 of Concentric. Today we're talking about the real power of personal development, of making yourself better as you go through this life, and some real, insight to not just how to do it, but how to think about it as you go through this process. Because I think a lot of times people look at self-improvement and personal development in terms of, let me get this handled and then I'm good, right? And it's really this ongoing process. And I promise that I don't mean that in an overwhelming way of, things never get better. Quite the opposite. It's a constant improvement. And it isn't that, you gain some of these skills and then you're a phenomenal speaker the next day. All your relationships are perfect. You make $1 million the next week. And sure, nobody would really say that that's what they're expecting, but there's a little piece that is like, let me just get this handled, and then I'm off to the races, right? And what actually happens is you get to that next level you're supposed to get to faster. All the challenges that come into your life, or challenging people maybe, you react differently. You handle them differently, which makes your life different, right? And those are the insights that we get into today, and really how to approach that and get all of that not figured out, but on the right path, right? Going in the right direction. And then as you get these distinctions to your life, they build on each other, and it's really powerful. We also dig into, HNLP. A lot of people have heard neuro-linguistic programming, the NLP side of things. There's some negative connotation there. There's some positive things. There's just like any other tool. It's been used strangely and weirdly and and wonderfully, all at the same time. And Gary goes into some really amazing stories of a lot of the foundation of what he teaches today, how he helps people today. So we get into a little bit of that as well to give folks some context around that. Really powerful stuff. Enjoy. Welcome everyone to another episode of Concentric. Gary, how's it going?
I'm great. How are you, buddy?
Fantastic. Just enjoying the heck out of these episodes, and I don't know, it's just a lot of fun knowing what we're doing and what we're putting together for folks. It's incredible.
Well, my whole stint, as we spoke when we first got on and got to see each other after a week or so, was, the whole intent of all of this is really to help people in this one area that is, I think, the most mysterious area to have absolutely work for you. And it is the most essential one. Whether you're in business and relationships with your coworkers, your peers and management, or those that are your direct reports, or whether you're in a relationship that is struggling or with problems, or you're single and you want to be able to create the most healthy relationship as a support, as a ability to walk through life with your best friend through all the trials and tribulations that life throws at us. Whatever the reason, whatever the capability that you're seeking knowledge on, how do I get just so much more proficient in my relationships? what we're doing is giving as many tools as we possibly can to help people center in, focus, and in my opinion, all success comes from your ability to be in a relationship successfully. So this is what we're doing, is attempting to give as many ideas, many tools, and new concepts that we possibly can, and help people, as many as feels the need to show up and listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that, like all areas of personal development, it doesn't stop. There's not an end point. And that's a positive thing, though. I think a lot of people go into personal development or getting better at anything when it comes to the emotional side of things, especially. And they think there's this goal because maybe they're trying to solve a problem in their relationship, right? Or they're trying to get along better with this other person. And what, you've been able to really help people with for so many years now are those skills that, yes, they will solve that problem, but it will get you, not only does it apply to other areas of your life, but it gets you to that next level. And there's always a next level, but it's a positive thing, because you get better and better. You come across those people who, I need to learn something new to maybe interact with them better. But it evolves in such a great way.
Well, Jason, I think that it isn't a destination. It is an absolute journey. And there's a statement out of the mystical practices of the Hawaiian people that it says, now is the only moment of power. And when I first heard that, I was like, yeah, I get that, but I didn't understand the full impact of that. And the full impact of that statement is, from a biological perspective, in every single moment, we have the capacity through our thoughts and emotions and our language, which are, sort of the three key components to creating our reality. In that moment, we make a choice, whether we're going to follow the patterning of how we've been hardwired and conditioned to behave from our family of origin, from the very beginning of our lives forward, or whether we're going to put a sort of a flag in the ground and say, no, this is where I change. This is where I begin a new habit of thinking, of responding, and therefore, speaking and thinking and feeling, which causes a response. This is where I shifted to create a new pattern of behavior, a new habit that I'm choosing to become. And without that flag in the ground where you make a stand for your own personal development, for your own sense of becoming, that kind of project of constant kaizen, that art of constant improvement, that is where in that moment you decide to behave and respond differently, think about it differently, perceive it differently, therefore emotionally create this new superhighway of neurological connections that form a new, neural pathway for our thoughts, which are electrical charges to follow down. That in that moment, when we make that choice, that's when we start to change. And through the habit of continuing to make that same choice, that is how we biologically become our transformed self. But without that stake in the ground, that commitment to ourselves, we don't change. Because people will follow the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance is literally done through habit. And in that habit, we become lazy, and then we don't challenge ourselves. And if we're not liking the results that we're getting, then we have to form a new habit, how you speak and then how you respond. This is where the rubber hits the road in personal development. This is actually biology. I call it, the psychological biology of how we create us. We have to make a choice. And in that choice, then we start in that moment creating new neural pathways, which create new habits, which create then our transformation or our personal evolution.
That's great. I love that. That's such a powerful expansion on that statement of now, being that source of power. And I think just like you, I think we hear that and go like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But to take that deeper dive with it, like now over and over and over again, making that statement and that stake in the ground, I'm going to choose to be better. I'm going to branch and branch and branch and branch over and over again from a place of empowerment.
Yeah.
That's strong.
There's been times in my life where it's not that I like difficulties to come my way, I guess I really don't. But when difficulties do come my way, I say to myself, wow, this right now is when I would normally go X, Y, and Z, right? And my emotions are up and I'm feeling like this like pattern emerging out of me. And I know if I follow that, it's going to be harder for me to break out of it later. So in that moment, as soon as I start to feel my emotions rising, I go, okay, now this moment is a golden opportunity for me to break the pattern that I'm attempting to overcome and install a new behavior. This is not something that I dread. This is something that I will welcome so I can break the pattern. If I don't take it as that opportunity, if I don't put that frame around it, it's way more difficult for me to not respond in an old, outdated methodology that's misaligned to who I'm becoming. If I respond in a way that is congruent with who I'm becoming, that's where my stake in the ground is. If I follow an old pattern and I go into victim, which we all have the opportunity to do, if I stop that cascade of old patterns and thoughts and feelings, I can make a change in that moment. And the more I make that choice, the stronger I become in that direction of me evolving and acting out of my full potential self. But if I don't make that choice, I stay stuck in the quicksand of my past. So when difficulties come to you, it is this golden opportunity saying, nope, this is my golden opportunity to create a new neural pathway, to strengthen that in myself. And as I do that, it becomes easier and easier and easier for me over time until that is who you fully step into. Instead of battling with the past and your past patterns, more you condition yourself to make that choice, the easier it becomes. So by defaulting to the old pattern, it actually makes you weaker and weaker and weaker, because then you don't build the muscle of your new choice. We have to build that conditional muscle of a new choice. This is why it's not a magic pill. This is how we've become who we are, is by repetition of thought, words, and behavior and emotions. That's how we've solidified ourselves into the patterns we no longer want. And this is exactly the same system that we have to utilize to become who we're evolving to be. This is why it's not like, a happy retreat somewhere and, oh, gee, I feel so transformed. Yeah, you feel transformed for a week, but this is about you patterning you. This is about you taking a stand for you, and no one else can do it but you.
Yeah. And it is possible. It is hard at times, and but it's very possible. Like, it's an overused analogy, but it is the going to the gym analogy. You don't go once and you're all set and done. You keep working on it. And I'll tell you from experience, anyone out here sort of hasn't gone down this road, maybe, to speak to that evolution of things. An interesting concept that'll happen is you'll find yourself, as you get better at this and you condition yourself better, you'll find that you'll be in this situation and there may be even some traces of how you used to react, like the habit you were just talking about, Gary. Like you'll be going through the motions of somebody who's upset and angry stuff. And then this awareness will happen of like, why am I doing that or saying that? Like, I'm not even upset anymore. Like it's such a habit, and you're like, oh, this doesn't trigger me anymore. But there's still these little whiffs and traces of, and so you keep that self-awareness going so that in those moments you can go, oh yeah, that's funny. I'm not even bothered now. I can stop going through the motions of somebody who's bothered and move on.
Right. And you know what? As I'm sitting here, I'm looking and reflecting on my own life, and where I came from, to what I'm evolving myself to be. And there's a shortcut to all of this.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. If you want to take a deep dive into the concepts Gary is talking about here and so much more, I've got something for you. From time to time on the show, you may hear us talk about Gary's course, Creating Incredible Relationships. This course is the culmination of Gary's 35 years worth of seminars, one-on-one training, and transforming the lives of over 11,000 people on 4 different continents. To learn how to build alignment and, heck, just get along with others sometimes, we all require skills that are not commonly known and are not out there in the relationship development space. We need help. That's why Gary put this course together. The content in it is powerful and comprehensive. But just like we've done with this show, it's put together in a way that's easily consumable and quickly implemented. To gain the ability to take every relationship you have or want to have to the next level, go to garyscourse.com and see how to get started. Now, back to the show.
There are places in our lives where we make quantum leaps. We make quantum leaps. And I know for me, that, being an old, and this is when I was between 14 and 18. So this was like, another lifetime ago. But, I was a serious drug addict when I was quite young. And I carried around so much pain from my past that the only way I could cope was to numb myself. And I did that quite successfully. And I've often said I should not actually be alive because I did so many dangerous things with IV drugs that and the drugs of choice were the ones that kill you. And I thought to myself, okay, how did I break out of that? And I broke out of that I got clean and sober in 12 hours from smoking 3 packs of Marlboro Longs a day and shooting meth and heroin. I mean, how do you get clean and sober in 12 hours from something like that, some addictions like that? And I did from what I'll call my own personal spiritual experience. Now, everyone has these experiences that occur. You call them whatever you want. You can belong to any faith you want. You can have no faith. You still have a higher purpose for why you're here. And if you have no belief in that, that is perfect from the perspective that maybe your belief is to be the best expression of you that you can be on the time you have left. For those of you who believe that your soul travels on and is eternal, this also fits in. Nothing I say is contradictory to any belief system. But what I will say for me and my belief system, it was a miraculous moment when, I'm going to completely date myself here, when I was sitting in the front row of a concert being conducted by Donovan. He was an old Celtic folk singer during the Beatles' heyday. And he came up and he was tuning his sitar on a stage before the concert hadn't begun. And I'm in the front row, and he looks down at me and he goes, "You are wasting time." And every cell of my body lit up. And I knew exactly what he meant. And why he looked at me and said that, I've got zero idea. But he did. And one thing that I know is that I knew that my life was waning and I was not going to make it to be 18 or 19. I was going to die. And I knew it. Wow. And every cell lit up. And I said, I've got a purpose. And I remember I went home and I flushed all my drugs down the toilet. I broke all my needles. I went out on a hillside. Had to be raining, very dramatic. And I went out on a hillside on a Bay Ho in San Diego overlooking Mission Bay. There was canyons then. And I sat in the mud and I wept all night. And when the sun came up, I was a new man. Well, new boy. I went home and I went agoraphobic then for a year because all the emotions that I was attempting to suppress from drugs actually had to be faced. That meant to me I couldn't even look at anyone. I couldn't speak to anyone because I would stutter so badly from the anxiety that I couldn't interface with anyone for a year. It was just me and my dog. And I didn't leave my home for a year except for 3 o'clock in the morning to walk on the beach in San Diego with my dog. Now, that's depression. So when I started to come out of that, the reason I'm telling everybody this is because no matter where you think you are, there is a way out. And there is an energy that actually you've got something to do here, something that can't be done by anybody else, just you. You have a purpose, you have lives you're meant to touch, you have something to do here that no one else can do. So regardless of where you've been, regardless of where you're at right now, you can make a change. The reason I'm speaking about this again is because Gregory Bateson, the life partner of Margaret Mead, the great anthropologist, began this, he wrote a book and he described what he called logical levels. And the logical levels is the top level. He would say you cannot make a change at the same logical level. So there's environments. You can change your environment, but you take you wherever you go. Your behaviors, you can't necessarily, I'm going to diet and become like 90 pounds. And you can't necessarily change the behavior with another behavior. Like I'm 300 pounds now, I'm going to starve myself till I become 90. There has to be something that motivates that kind of action and behavior, and it's always the emotions. So then you go up to what your capabilities are. And your capabilities are governed by what you believe and what you value. And then above that is your sense of self. Who the heck are you? And above that is in who am I in the greater context of the world around me, which he called spirituality. Now, he was the mentor, the one that told John Grinder and Richard Banner, who were the original developers of NLP. There were a lot of other people that helped broaden the scope of that initial study out. He was the one that said, yes, that's useful, no, that's not useful, and kind of guided the whole development of NLP. Now, NLP is called the science of human excellence.
For folks who don't know, neuro-linguistic programming.
Programming, exactly. But what developed out of that was a whole slew of different trainers that brought some really incredible information to that fundamental beginning of that science. Now, through the years, that science got distorted. It's like a scalpel. In the hands of a skilled surgeon, it creates absolute miracles. In the hands of a psychopath, probably not so much. But it's not the scalpel, it's the wielder of the instruments. Out of that science was born a process called humanistic neurolinguistic psychology. A group of NLP trainers and master NLP trainers came together and began to evolve it, noticing that in the trenches of their sessions, one-on-one sessions with clients, that when the client made a change, as Gregory Bateson said, at the spiritual level and the identity level, all the behaviors, beliefs, and values and capabilities all changed. It was like it changed overnight. So why would you work at a lower logical level when you really have to work at a higher logical level to get pervasive change throughout that person's life experience?
And those are those quantum leaps that you were talking about earlier.
Quantum leaps. I think one of the most influential trainers I ever worked with was Robert Dilts. And Robert Dilts took the foundation of NLP and began to create systems that worked at a higher logical level. John Overdorf, Julie Silverthorne, great trainers. They were the foundational beginning of humanistic neurolinguistic psychology because they noticed that through all the work they were doing, you make changes there, everything underneath it begins to shift. So I was part of that initial movement of HNLP, and I began to develop systems as well, coupled with incredible information from a variety of different sources, Harville Hendricks and a variety of other relationship experts, as well as more, I think, term therapy interventions that began to build the scale of course, what some of the tools are that we're bringing to the table. Now, one of the premises was when I first began my career, I began working in the AIDS community back in the early 80s when there was nothing. No one knew what it was. No one knew how to work with it. No one knew anything. And I began to look for what are the systems, because people got diagnosed, they were dead in 3 months. What are the systems that you can utilize to get people a resolution with their lives like in 3 months, because that's all they had. Yeah. And the only thing I could find was this body of information, which is quick-term therapy with very lasting results. People didn't have time to simply talk about or theorize about what the issues were. They needed deep emotional change and spiritual evolution quickly. And when they got that, they could get to peace with their lives, because it was a death sentence then. Yeah. So one of the things that we have to look at, if you desire to make quick progress, to evolve quickly, you have to work with how have I created my subjective experience, my subjective reality? Because if you understand how something works, you can fix it. It's almost like opening up the owner's manual for your mind. You can't tune up a car unless you have an owner's manual, how to set the points and what spark plugs to use and what are the different pressures in your tires. You can't do any of that unless you have an owner's manual. And here we are, writing them out around to the most complex neurological organism on the planet. And who showed up to us and say, hey, would you like the owner's manual for your head, which drives everything? So this is what we're doing. We're actually opening up the owner's manual for how we've created our subjective experience so that we can create more heaven than hell, more peace, more self-actualization, more evolution, more potentiality, like opening up that pathway to our evolving self rather than spinning in a stuck pattern of our ancestral past. So the whole purpose of what you and I do in our conversations is creating a trajectory in that path of becoming our full potentialized self. And we're doing it in the laboratory of our relationships. If we really wanted to narrow down what are our conversations really about, that's what it's about.
Yeah. And that's so powerful. And that's being such a foundational framework to everything you do. That was a reason, again, there's some of these early episodes we want to have because it's so critical that people understand that context that we're coming from, right? With a lot of this that you teach. And as they hear, reference to NLP, HNLP, those kind of things. Some people have no idea what it is. Some people have negative connotations, like you talked about. Some people took it in a weird direction, a very manipulative direction, right? I want to make sure that we can reference people back at times to this episode, and like there's that concept. This is what this is really all about, and it's to help you make those quantum leaps in your relationships.
Absolutely. And again, I'll say one of the most important things we need to remember is that this is literally the science of human excellence. It is literally the science of how you become way more quickly that individual you're evolving to be. If you don't understand how your emotional states, the key factors that happen to every one of us, these key significant events that we build constellation of beliefs around and therefore develop our values, have been happening to our nervous system from the moment we were coming down the birth canal till now. And if what happened to us was not unconditional love throughout our lives, and I don't know many of us who've had that, but we've had these various experiences that causes fear, limiting beliefs, misaligned values, reactions in our behavior, because oftentimes we'll have a trigger out here that our reptilian brain clicks on and we go, oh, fight or flight, dumps cortisol and adrenaline, shut shuts down the frontal lobes. We come in and we're acting survival. And until we become aware that we're on this automatic system because we're in this body that is literally built to survive, until we start not viewing our external environment as danger points all along the way, even in our adult relationships, when we look at our partner and we have fear being triggered off constantly, that is what we have to get a hold of, get to our core, get to our center, get to our purpose, get to our mission, live by our values, align it in word, thought, and action, focus on it constantly, and build a new neural pathway to really our fuller potential self. Until we can do that, we are stuck.
Yeah.
And the more this progress, the better off we become.
Yeah. And I'll make this one last summation there too, and last point, and we'll wrap this particular episode. But the really key thing that you talked about there was the fact that this isn't just about people who have something wrong or who are in this, having this problem, and have to fix it. This is, like you said, the owner's manual for all of us, for just being human and operating better, because we all have those triggers, those upset relationships and all of that, but also just going through life and experiencing it better, fuller, all of that. This entire framework of things is about just going through life. It's not, hey, you've got a problem, I'm going to help you fix that. Like, this is from day one, like you talked about, getting better.
When you think about it, and if you happen to be graced by being a parent, you desire to be the best expression of you that you can be, because that's who your kids are going to model. If you run a company or you're a manager in a company, then you desire to be the best possible expression of a person who can inspire, so that people who are working, who are your direct reports, are modeling the best expression of you, because they do. So all throughout the course of our lives, we are influencing people. Why not be the very best influence we can be? The bottom line at the end of the day is that we're here to shine bright. We're not here to survive. We're here to shine brightly and be the greatest positive influential factor that we can be. And in that, we lead an incredibly successful and happy life. And that's what ultimately we're attempting to do. In my opinion, the very first relationship you're in is with yourself. And the better relationship you have with self, the more successful your relationships can be with others. But until that initial relationship is solid, then it's pretty challenging to have a healthy, powerful relationship with anybody else.
Absolutely. Powerful words. This is great stuff. I want to wrap this episode up here. I wanted to make sure that folks had this concept, this foundational teaching, about what it is that, as you guide people through, and we'll get broader and more in minutia, both on solving some of specific issues, but your very unique, very effective approach is wrapped and based in all of this. I wanted to make sure that we had this down to kind of reference people to and point people back to. So thanks for going through all of this, Gary. And we'll see you all next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Concentric. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd certainly like a great review from you on your favorite podcasting platform. But more than that, what really makes a difference to a show like ours is a recommendation to someone who would love this show like you do. Word of mouth referrals to your network and your podcast devouring friends is incredibly helpful to the growth of this show. For episode links and info, go to concentricshow.com. Thank you so much, and remember to keep building alignment to build a better life.